Okay, good evening, everyone. The Board of Selectmen is already in session as we were in executive session prior to. Would everyone please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, let's kick it off with the public comment. We ask that you go to the podium. The microphone is on. Just state your name and your address and your issue that you would like to speak on. Yes. Yep, right here. Thank you.
Your microphones are off.
Good evening. I'm Monica Lawton, 11 Story Street. As we all know, we have a special election next Tuesday on the question of a debt exclusion for the DPW building. And some of us are feeling very confident that it is going to pass. We've had friends out at the transfer station quite a bit and every day this week. So just looking ahead a little bit, I think one of the next important steps will be to appoint a DPW building committee so that the project can move forward at all possible speed. So I just wanted to mention that. I think it's very important to have a building committee with representation from the Board of Selectmen, certainly, and the DPW commissioners, and the Building Study Committee, et cetera. And I just wanted to be on the record with mentioning I think that's an important thing to look forward to doing very soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Monica, for all your hard work and the committee as well. Anyone else? Toby.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. I'd like to comment on the de minimis easements when you come to that. Would that be possible?
Why don't you make a comment right now? If that's okay.
Yes. The process that was set up is good as far as it goes, but doesn't go far enough. There also need to be sign-offs from the DPW commissioners, perhaps from the Conservation Commission and the rights of way. It may well be that the easements don't concern those groups, in which case it would be no skin off their nose to say so, not our business, not our concern, and certainly the DPW should be consulted. My other concern relates to Millbrook Meadow and the bench. You have the Millbrook Meadow Committee here before you. At the town meeting, the proposed bench, 20 feet long and costing $15,000, had the distinction of being the first community preservation project to be rejected. Now, we don't know why it was rejected. It may be that the voters would have preferred either of the things that I suggested as alternatives, although we couldn't have chosen them then and there, that is, standard park benches or granite blocks, such as they have up at the DPW yard by the Carlson Quarry Pump House, or perhaps what Z. Sepula suggested, teak benches, which would have to be bolted to the ground. What we do know is that the voters overwhelmingly rejected it. So if you're to be asked to accept such a bench from a private group, for instance, the Millbrook Meadow Conservancy, I feel it's up to you to bring that proposal to a town meeting, the town meeting having rejected it, and ask them to accept with gratitude the bench or reject it. I'd like a response.
Well, I think the town meeting rejected the amount of money. If it's a donation and it fits and the Board of Selectmen agrees to it, I think that would be fine.
So that, Mr. Chairman, is actually the prime purpose for the Millbrook update tonight, for them
Okay.
to have an opportunity to talk with the board about where the board stands.
Okay.
On this.
So
particular
we'll be discussing it. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my name is Patricia Pierce, 35 Broadway. I'm here as an information person about the Seabrook nuclear reactor, which has failing concrete. The Atomic Safety and Licensing Board had a hearing last week regarding the reactor, and they will not make a decision until later in the winter. My concern is that there are several issues. The reactor has 100 tons of uranium fuel in its core. It has 1,500 tons of used fuel in pools on site. The ocean is rising, the storms are worse, the future is very unknowable. I think the reactor should be closed while the degradation is being investigated. It's called alkali silica reaction. There are 26 buildings in the reactor that are failing, not failing yet, they're cracking. The history is that Seabrook has emitted 40,000 curies a year for 30 years. That's over 1.2 million curies. Curies are enormous numbers of emissions. It's the blip is an emission. I have tried to find out what process could close the reactor, and the boards of health in the state are responsible for the safety of the towns and the reactor. So I have a petition that I'm circulating, and I think you should know that it's being treated somewhat casually, even though they had the hearing. There's no criticality, and I feel that the reactor should be closed before the failure. The dome won't fail, but any interruption in the coolant will cause the core to increase its temperature, and that is uncontrollable, and it's a meltdown. So I'm hoping that you will help with the petition to close the reactor, and I'm meeting with churches and boards of health.
Great. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else for public comment? Very good. Let's keep moving on. We are at letter E, which is the reappointment interview. Kate Shaw, if you'd like to join us at the table.
That's you.
Yeah, reappointment. Is there a motion?
There is. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board appoint Kate Shaw as a member of the Historic District Commission for a term to expire on June 30th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Welcome.
Thank you.
And have you enjoyed your stay on the committee?
Very much so.
Okay.
Been very honored to serve for almost 2 years, I think now,
Yeah.
and happy to continue to do so.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of the committee?
Just feeling that we're doing the right thing for the town
Okay.
and trying to help.
Right.
So, yeah.
Good. Any questions, comments?
We're lucky to have you.
Yeah.
Very lucky.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And on the building study committee.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, Kate's pulling like more than double duty right
Yeah.
now. And I think the experience that you've brought, obviously, as an architect, has been like just enormously helpful to so many aspects of
Right.
town. What are kind of the hot issues right now? I think we haven't met. I mean, Jim Ugoni comes in
Yeah.
obviously occasionally, but what kind of hot stuff going on right now?
Well, we have a really beautiful house on Upper Main Street that has been neglected for many years, and the owner is looking to restore it.
Great.
Do some renovations, mostly on the rear, but it's always that balance
Yeah.
of trying to make the house livable for today, but preserve the important historic aspects of it. And they seem to be very committed to doing that on the original, very early part of the house.
Yeah.
So
nice.
that was just last night we went into that. It
Can I ask
was
one more question?
exciting.
Please, go ahead.
So do you, I think as an architect, you have kind of a special view of this, a special perspective. Do you feel at this point with kind of the towns, if you're in a historic district, the regulations are reasonable considering like what it would add in terms of cost for someone either restoring or rebuilding a home? Like, do you still find that it's okay, or do you think it's like extremely cost prohibitive?
Oh, it's definitely okay.
Okay.
And we're committed to working with people.
Great.
So, you know, all of us are very much hands-on type of people. And, you know, we're always trying to find a way that's least costly,
Yeah.
most effective,
Great.
you know, and try to suggest it to people. And most of the time, people are very happy to hear alternatives. Maybe they just haven't thought of them.
Yeah.
You know, occasionally things are more expensive, but then there are things that are less expensive. So,
Great.
you know, like replacing windows is very expensive.
Yeah.
And restoring them in some cases might be less expensive. And it's certainly more historically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's so
Preferable.
helpful that you work with people and try to find alternatives.
Oh,
And don't
yeah.
just say
Yeah.
this doesn't work.
Right.
You know, come back so that they then have to go find, you know, spend more money to find alternatives that work.
Punitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
know the recent homes that have been restored, especially downtown, have come out just
Amazing.
amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just
Beautiful.
gorgeous.
Yeah. It's so much a part of our town.
So
you know,
much a
what
part of
makes
the
our town
Yeah, and
our
everyone
town.
really, I mean, even,
Right.
you know, even young people in town, I think appreciate when something is restored and still looks, you know, looks
Yep.
like it did when they were young and that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can tap into your expertise, maybe with help with the Pigeon Cove Fire Station. We haven't gotten any people to look at the RFP for that. We have the money through CPC for that. And we'll try
That's
to
true.
have you maybe take just a look at the RFP and see if anyone you know who might help us with that, because you're an architect, you're on the historic, you're at Building Study Committee. You have all those hats that we haven't been able to tap in to get someone to help us. So I'll be talking with you later.
All right. I'd be happy
We
to.
have another committee assignment for you.
Okay.
I'm glad you came.
Exactly, okay.
Okay.
Okay, you've heard the motion, it's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes. Congratulations, and
Thank
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
again, Kate. Nice to see you.
Okay, that's our only interview. Going to selectmen briefings, the planning board. If you guys want to, you want to come up here, sit,
Is it just Jason?
are you the
Me.
only-
Thanks, here.
Thanks here.
Thanks, yeah.
The
Co-chair.
second Shaw Act.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Um,
Double duty here.
Yeah. So, thanks for thinking of my wife for another thing to do. Yeah.
We're good at that.
with the gift that keeps giving.
Hank Betts, my fellow board member, is here. And I'm just going to give you a pretty quick rundown on a couple of things, one of which I think you already have on the agenda. And I don't know, I could talk about it later, which is the easement issue. You did get a letter from our board with a recommendation regarding a request. I guess this is the first time under
We didn't get it.
this new bylaw where this procedure is being used. So we had a pretty good discussion on it, and the letter reflects really what the board as a whole thinks about this process and what to do in this particular case. So that's one thing. The other thing that's a kind of a big issue now, and it just came up, is I don't know if some of you remember, obviously back, I think it was in 2015, Hank, where we had a town meeting and there was a bylaw approved regarding it's under section 4 of the zoning bylaw, it's section 4, subsection 11C, 411C. And I won't go into all the details here because it is detailed, but basically what it says is that if a dwelling and an accessory structure exceeds a certain square footage, a gross floor area is called, that the setback required from the property lines essentially doubles. It goes from 10 feet to 20 feet. And that, was a reaction to some of the things that were being built that were really close to the property line. So that was adopted in 2015. However, what was brought to our attention, and I'm not picking on any particular property, but this property has come up, which is 51 Marmion Way, is that we don't have any jurisdiction over this. It's not for us to, there's no subdivision or site plan. However, what came to light was that the interpretation of this bylaw, and the interpretation was done by the building inspector, was that the gross floor area would only apply to the residents and not apply, you wouldn't, in other words, you wouldn't put the gross floor area of the residence and an accessory structure together to come up with your total gross floor area. So he was just looking at the gross floor area of the residence, not the gross floor area of the accessory building combined. So in other words, the setback requirement, the double setback requirement from 10 to 20 feet would only apply if the gross floor area of the residence, I think was 4,000 square feet. So that's not the way that the planning board, and I was not on the board at the time, but I know Hank was, and that was not the way that the planning board intended this bylaw to be interpreted. They intended it to be, you take the gross floor area of the residence, combine that with the gross floor area of the accessory structure, like a garage or something like that, and that will determine whether you meet the 4,000 square foot threshold or not. And that came to our board's attention. We thought, well, instead of us writing a letter to the building inspector expressing our concern, let's get an opinion from council on this point, because there were some ambiguities in the bylaw. We admit that, and in fact, we're going to be working on correcting those, but we needed to get an opinion of council. So we did get an opinion. Without going into all the detail, council did confirm the position that the planning board had believed was the way this thing should be written. So now we've got a situation where we've got a bylaw that says one thing, and as interpreted by the town council, and we've got the building inspector interpreting it a different way. And I don't put any bad motive on his part. I think this is his interpretation. I met with him, we discussed it. He explained why he interpreted it the way he did. He had a rationale for it, but it was not the correct interpretation. So, this is not our bailiwick. We're the planning board. We don't have any enforcement jurisdiction. So it's something that maybe needs to be discussed with the building inspector. And specifically, again, I'm not picking on this property, but it happens to be the catalyst for this whole discussion, which is 51 Marmion Way. So that's one thing. The other thing we've been, does anybody have any questions on
Yeah,
that?
I
Because I'll
do.
move on.
May
Sure,
I?
go right ahead. Of course.
So is the building inspector saying that despite the fact that town council has issued an opinion, he's going to continue to interpret the rule the way he thinks it should be interpreted?
No, Denise, he hasn't said that because he didn't, he's been away, and I told him I was going to get an opinion from town council.
okay.
He hasn't seen it.
He hasn't seen it yet,
Okay.
right? So he's going to come back tomorrow and see it. So who knows where that will lead? But I was very upfront with him
Yeah.
about it, and
They're
that's what we
building
were going to
already.
do. So
They're building already, though, right?
yeah,
Right, and the
Yeah.
foundation
exactly.
is, and the
Yeah,
foundation.
they got a
is in.
building
Right.
permit.
Yeah.
So
They received a building permit.
right. So I mean, we wouldn't.
I'm not sure what that looks like yet.
Okay.
Paul hasn't seen it yet, so I
Okay.
need to see where he
Okay.
is, and then we're probably going to end up having to circle up and see what that looks
Right.
like.
Okay.
Selectman Campbell?
Just tighten up the language a little bit? I mean, is that,
Well,
because
we,
if you have two,
Forward.
huh?
Moving forward.
Moving forward.
yeah, we are. I mean, this
Yeah.
is a priority for our board for the spring 2020 town meeting. Is to take the language of this and kind of revisit it, rewrite it, keep the same principles there, but tighten it up so there's no more, there's no ambiguity. No one can interpret it one way or another. I mean, this is the way it's going to be. That's one of the things we're going to do. So I know when this,
Helpful.
I know just historically when this was adopted, it was controversial. And it was, there were positions on both sides. But now it's in the bylaws and it should be enforced. So the other thing, two other things. One, as you know, the planning board, we got a grant a few years ago, several grants actually, to do two things. The transportation-oriented development zoning, which is around the train station, and then the other area is the walk shed. They call it the half-mile walk shed. In other words, not around the train station immediately, but within a half mile of the train station. And these were two separate grants, two separate projects. And basically what they were was come up with a zone, some zoning for each one of these things. Well, long story short, the grant money's over. Our consultant at the Metropolitan Council, Planning Council, is no longer employed by the town because the money's gone. And I just got an email from him recently saying, gee, it would be great if you guys would do something about this to go forward. So I'm just kind of planting the seed at this point. This ties into the whole affordable housing issue that we have with the town of Rockport. And I think actually most immediately the transportation-oriented development is a concept that is going to require a developer to come in and build all these things. But I think the walk shed zoning, which is much more modest, but maybe in some ways could affect more, is to make it easier for the use of accessory structures, garages, et cetera, to use them for, rental units so people could, have apartments that could supplement their income, but also help people who maybe couldn't afford, some of the rents otherwise. So that's, but that also ties into something else, which I know you're working on, which is, the short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, because what we don't want is people converting these things to apartments and then, just putting them on Airbnb. So then the people who we want to be able to rent it are excluded anyway. So this is something that I think you might want to take a look at. I don't know if there are any senses on the board now about this. I'm here to just kind of tell you that this might be something we might look at, but we'd like to hear from this board about that. And
I think the transit-oriented development also ties into a bigger issue,
yes,
which is that with the addition of the Harbor Light development on Granite Street, and should the transit-oriented development move forward, we would have no capacity
Right.
left in our wastewater treatment
Right.
plant, none. And in the meantime, we are adding sewer connections. So we have to reconcile as a town what we want to do about that. I'm a huge proponent of affordable housing, and I want to see that happen, but we also have to be aware of the reality of the situation.
Right.
So I think before we do anything, we should address that problem.
Yeah, that has to be.
Yeah.
well, that's why I say this other, to separate the two out, the transit-oriented development, which is it's kind of a, it's almost like a imagination thing, for that to happen. So many things have to fall into place.
Right.
But you're right, Denise, and then that Kleinfelder report had talked about that. That's years and years away for that ever to come. But the other part of it, the walk shed rezoning, is more doable. It doesn't have the same implications on the wastewater treatment, because it's going to be much more modest than having 70 units, which would be the
Right, but
TOD,
I guess if I may,
Please.
my point is that we're adding connections now.
Right.
We continue to add connections. Harbor Light is coming. And, adding more connections with the walkshed zoning is yet another increment. So
is.
I just want us all to be aware of that and
We have to be.
make
I
it
mean,
an
Yep.
informed decision.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, thank you. So anyway, that's just something that we may be looking at. And the last thing is, and I don't know if I should stay for this or not, but I know you're going to talk about the easement aspect of this toward the end of the meeting. I'd be happy to stay. Otherwise, I'll just tell you, you've got our letter and what we recommended, and it's less than a full unconditional easement to a property owner. We want the town to reserve the right to be able to go in there if needed, especially on Marmion Way, which is prone to flooding, to go in there and do things. And if they have to remove this stone wall that this property owner wants to put in the easement, then the town should be able to remove it to do its work. And that's kind of the bottom line of our opinion.
So,
That's-
Mr. Chair, just to
Please.
tonight is not about the specific easement, it's more about what process the board wants to use to aggregate some of this information in.
Oh, okay.
So, it wouldn't be for that, they won't act this evening on that topic, so,
Just
they haven't
discussion.
gotten your letter in yet, but specifically because we want to gauge, through this discussion, how they'd like it to come to them and what they want.
So they haven't gotten the letter? All right,
Purposely
then-
have not
Then
received that
fine,
info yet.
then I'll, 54 Marmion wanted an easement over the town's property to build a stone wall. Primary reason was seawater intrusion. They didn't want it, and they wanted to build this stone wall to prevent it. And we went out there and looked at it. And based on that, our view of it, our discussions with the owner, and our long-range planning mandate, which is what the law says we need to look at, we wrote a letter saying, cautioning against giving a full unconditional easement to this property owner because of potential of rising sea levels, a stone wall that may have to be removed by the DPW to do road work, the potential of undergrounding of the utilities, which has already been done on part of this. So it's more complicated than initially one would think. So you'll get the letter. I won't talk about that
Yeah,
anymore.
tonight
but
is
it's
just
been
more
written.
Yeah.
procedurally
Yeah,
how you want
procedure.
to move
Exactly,
forward on
yep.
something like this.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
Okay.
I think we're done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Nice to see you, Jason.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped in.
Henry Betts, 13 Penzance Road, Planning Board. When we put together that bylaw on limiting sizes of dwellings on the property, it was pretty hot in town, and it was hot because of the building 12,000 square foot house up the road, which was a problem. We spent lots of effort trying to get it right on limiting sizes of property, 2 acres and less. And we did mean if it's over, we'll say 4,000, if it's 4,001 foot, sorry, the setback's 20 foot. We really did mean that, just as on a zoning, if you're to get a variance, if you're 2 feet off the off the setback, you're not gonna get your variance.
Right.
Period, kind of thing. That's what we meant, and that's what the town meant when they voted, and they were pretty happy to vote. I think it was a pretty good vote. On what was presented to the town was quite reasonable and quite worthy. So those of us who were on the board in 2015 were very surprised to hear on 51 Marmion Way that we've got foundation for a garage in place now with setbacks that are incorrect. And the problem that Jason speaks about with our bylaw is not new construction. New construction in our bylaw is very clear that all new, if you have a clear lot, which it was, and it's all new construction, then the setbacks include the dwelling and accessory buildings, which includes a garage, at least as I understand accessory buildings. And it was very, very clear. And we were very many of the board were very surprised that we saw what's there. Now, there could be a problem, an interpretation, if you have a building already there and you're putting something new up, and that exceeds a certain limit, then I guess the way the bylaw is written.
So Hank, I don't want to interrupt, but I think we're probably
Yeah, I'm gonna-
inappropriately speaking about
Here's what I want to make sure.
unaddressed.
I want to make sure you know you need to address it.
Right, that's fine, but we actually
Right.
it's inappropriate for us to talk about a
I
specific
know.
address
I
without
just want to
the
make sure
people.
that you understand that if someone wanted
do.
to challenge us, like a neighbor or so
Right.
forth, you don't want to get a lawsuit on your
Right,
hands.
we understand, but we also don't want to get a lawsuit for
Please.
inappropriately talking about
Right.
someone without it being on our agenda. But
Yeah.
I think
Good.
we all totally understand that, and it is important to note again
you.
that the building that's happening, they have received a building permit for.
I believe they
Right,
have.
so, but
Yep.
beyond that, but thanks for the information, I just don't want us
Thank
to
you.
get
No,
into
no,
trouble.
that's-
Thank you
that's a
for,
good point, very good point. And thank you, Jason.
thank you both, yeah, I know that.
Jason, are there any more Shaws that want to address the community
Want
before
to
we
volunteer
go on?
for something?
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the Millbrook Meadow Committee.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
as the Millbrook Meadow Committee is making their way up, the specific reason Millbrook is joining the board this evening is to discuss with the board their thoughts on potentially moving forward with a bench. Everybody's aware of how that went at town meeting, but the Conservancy has been fundraising for this. So this is the opportunity for the board to share their thoughts and if they're comfortable proceeding through that path in discussing one-on-one on whether the board wanted them to come in. There was some feedback that they should come in and there should be a discussion on the topic.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
that's the prime intention, which I believe the chairman is prepared to address with you this evening.
Mr. Chairman.
Good evening. My name is Sam Colburn, Chairman of the Millbrook Meadow Committee still. And with me is Vice Chair Shannon Mason and the Chair of the Subcommittee of Art and Play, which involves whales, playgrounds, benches, and long sitting walls. And and Laura Hallowell, our project manager through all of the dredging and restoration of the meadow, and our advisor, Chris DeRosa, who has been advising us on design of the playground and design of the whole park over and above the work of the Malone and McBroom, who is our overall contractor. I can thank you for coming to our grand opening on the 17th of August. Thank you, Mitch, as well. And we'll give you a rain check.
Yes.
And since then, we've installed DPW has installed 6 beautiful new park benches, and Wolf Hill has planted a whole number of shrubs along the boundary between the park and the parking lot, the Peg Leg parking lot, with 4 more trees to be planted in the spring. And those would be all two silver maples and 2 red maples. And yesterday the contractor came and gave working on his punch list, and project manager Hallowell says it looks like they've done an excellent job, even fixing the dog fountain. Well, it's a people fountain, but it also has a dog capability, and which we had a good use of on Sunday with the dog blessing. And finally, we come to the proposed long sitting wall, and I'll turn it over to Barbara for that.
Not very loud.
Yeah, it's on. Yeah.
It's green.
It is on. Oh, it's
There
green.
we go.
Yeah, what's up here? So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk to the board. I was very disappointed to not be able to come to town meeting. As most of you know, I had an injury. I have an injury, and have finally gotten the pain level under control. So I'm happy to be here tonight to talk to you about any misunderstandings and to answer any questions you may have about our proposal going forward. This stone sitting wall, we're now calling it a sitting wall, so it won't be confused with a bench because it's a different kind of a place to sit. I did talk to most of you, I think, at our opening and showed you the pictures of the sketch done by Heidi Zander, the concept sketch. And this is the third of 3 initiatives of the Art and Play Subcommittee. The first being Millie the Whale, the second the playground, and now the sitting wall. So just to give you an idea of the concept, thinking of the walk up from Beach Street, as you walk along the stream and come past the dogwood thicket and the playscape, it's almost an imperceptible rise in elevation until you get to the top, just below the dam, and you turn around and you can see the whole park and you can see the ocean beyond. So it's kind of a wow moment when you get up there to the top. It's a wonderful place to have a place to sit down and view, and also to it's an invitation to pause and to not only see the sights of the meadow, but also to hear the sound of the water. It's also an invitation to kids to play, and it's always interesting to see how kids use a feature, how they will climb on it. It will be constructed so that there won't be sharp edges, and it's not all that tall. And I can visualize they might climb up on top of it and then tumble down the hill and have a lot of fun doing that. It's also a gathering place for teaching, and I have a photo from the Rockport 8th grade Science Day in June of 2018, where the kids were sitting in exactly the same location where we proposed to put the bench. It's a nice place to gather for a talk about the natural beauty and wildlife of the site from either side of the bench, because as you face the dam, of course, you see the eel ladder, which is something that Eric likes to give talks about. So it's multifunctional that way. It's also a tribute to Rockport because it will showcase the craft of stone masonry. And this is a continuation of a long tradition here, which continues every day. We see examples of wonderful stone walls that are built around town. Because of its length, it's a gathering place for large groups or small groups. It'll have a slight curve to it, so it's a friendly place for a large group to gather, but it's also long enough that there could be several small groups and they would still feel like they have their privacy. The wood benches that were just installed are 6 feet long, so this is substantially longer, and the 6-foot-long benches would probably be good for individuals, for couples, for 2 couples, but when you have a large group, it's nice to have a larger space where you can congregate. Also, we think the flat surface is important because we're not having picnic tables, and it's a place you can spread out a picnic. And that's something that differentiates it from the wooden benches, which have a curved seat, so they will be comfortable to sit in. So in summary, the long stone sitting wall or bench will be very practical, but it will also be pleasing to look at. It will be unique to Rockport and a feature of the restored meadow and park. And the stone, which will be the same look as the dam, this is a picture of the dam stone, will visually bring the dam look down into the meadow. So it will tie the 2 locations, the pond and the meadow, in a way they haven't been connected before. So going forward, we would propose that the Conservancy raise funds, solicit bids, hire a contractor, and supervise the construction. And then we would hope to gift the project to the town, which is what we did with the whale and the play equipment. We have already raised $5,400, which we think is pretty remarkable because we haven't gone out with a special campaign yet. And the footing has already been installed. That was part of the renovation project, so you can actually see where the bench will sit. That's already done. So I would like to ask if you have any questions that I can answer or Chris can answer if there are questions about materials. And
I do, if you don't mind. Sure. So pardon me. One of the concerns that obviously everybody had was local materials.
Would you speak up, please, Don?
Oh, I'm sorry, Sam. Any better? Is that okay? All right. One of the concerns was the materials and the sourcing of those materials. So where would the materials for this come from?
Chris LaRosa, 89 Phillips Avenue in Rockport, Mass. How are you folks?
Good, how are you?
Thank you,
Nice
good.
to see you.
The materials for the bench would be exclusively Rockport granite. What it would replicate would be the existing wall background, of the mill, the waterfall area. If you look in the background, the bench will have the same base as that. So it reads as a continuous, part of the park and the infrastructure of it.
So the picture that is over there kind of shows more rounded stones, where if you look at a picture of the dam wall, it's more square granite.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
There's a combination of both on the wall that exists now. There are some cut granite pieces, which tend to be gray in color, and there's also Rockport fieldstone, which was acquired at the DPW barn.
Okay. But all of the sources will be local
Yes.
materials.
Yes.
Perfect.
Great,
Perfect.
great. Want me to comment?
Sure. Lovely.
Sure. When you first of all, I think the sketch of it is art in itself, which I think I said to someone at the
Yeah, you
opening.
did.
I think that it looks lovely. I mean, I think it's beautiful. I think it's, it was unfortunate that it didn't pass for community preservation, but totally understood. And my feeling is, if you were coming to us with the idea, if we forgot about the CPC application for it and the Conservancy came to us with the hope to fundraise for it and then place it, we would look to you for the placement and the materials. I'm happy to see that it's Rockport granite, obviously, but I think it's beautiful. I think it sounds great. And I think my guess is you'll have no trouble fundraising for it, as you've already seen. But I think it's beautiful.
Is there a date that you would like to begin construction, or is it? I know that it's all depending on the money, fundraising, and so forth.
Yeah, it depends on the fundraising. I think and we are going to get more bids. I think but once the construction starts, it'll go very quickly. So it's a matter of months. And now we're getting into the season, when it's best for the construction. So we've got quite a few months where we would have the opportunity to get it ready for next summer if we can ramp up the fundraising.
Good. Denise?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that we'd be lucky to be able to accept such a gift for the town.
I know, I agree.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, the whole place looks wonderful.
I have a couple questions. So I went down there a couple times this week and last week, and I noticed there are 8 benches right now. So
You're counting the granite
yeah,
ones.
there are 4 granite, 3 metal with backs, wooden with metal with backs on them, and 1 flat one down by the whale.
Right.
So you mentioned 6.
Of the wooden.
Of the wooden ones. So
Wooden
there are more
ones.
to come? There are 3
No,
more?
there's-
Oh, they're
there's-
further up?
There are 2 at the pond.
Oh, down at the pond, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't count those. Okay. And my question was, I was on CPC for a long time. I know it was sad that it didn't get passed at town meeting, but I personally am concerned that there were a lot of questions about I don't think people didn't pass it just because it was CPC money. I think they were concerned that it was another long bench without backs on it that was going to be hard for people to sit. And my question to you is, why aren't you putting picnic tables down there? I think, just walking down there yesterday, there were 2 people sitting with oxygen canisters, bent over, sitting on the benches with the backs. It would have been so much more comfortable for them to be able to sit on a bench, lean over, read a paper, look at a book. I just think that it's a park. You need, I know at town meeting they talked a lot about families and picnicking and sitting on this long bench, but I really think that there needs to be picnic tables down there where families can enjoy it, where someone with oxygen, walking with canes, can sit and lean onto something. Being a nurse, I just think that's needed down there. I don't understand, and I just heard you for the first time say about no benches.
Well,
Why was that?
they're not
thought?
ruled out. It's interesting when you start trying to place things there and you don't want to clutter.
Right.
It's hard.
Right.
To find places. But
I guess-
was sort of worried about trash too, and
Yeah.
things being spilled. on picnic tables, but they're certainly not ruled out.
But see, that was my question as to why would be a long bench where people could sit and spread out for a picnic when picnic tables would be such a nice addition down there for, let's say, someone to walk down and read the paper, lean on something and read it, read their book. There's no leaning space for people, and I think a long bench, this is just my personal opinion, would be another hard object for them sitting on. That's just my personal opinion, and that there was such controversy at town meeting about it, and I don't think it was all CPC money
Yeah.
that was concerned about.
Well,
Excuse me, could I interject? What town meeting was asking is an expenditure of $15,000. You had already approved this. The DPW commissioners had approved it. The MMI had built it into their plans. This was, the only thing we needed was the money.
Yep.
Now we're busy raising the money ourselves. So we didn't expect to have to redesign the thing that we had. And that's why people booed me when I spoke up in town meeting at Toby's suggestion that we take some granite blocks and stack them up together, because that's not the way this park was built. That $75,000 playground wasn't just something knocked together with something we got from the transfer station. We spent, we hope, the town's money and the donations we got from people, mostly from Rockport, to build a quality park that will last, we hope, for another generation or two. And so we didn't, and that was what the question was for the people at town meeting. Do you want to spend this $15,000 for this?
Yep,
Or
absolutely.
for other things? And they gave us the answer, and that was very clear.
What?
But nobody was asking the town to approve the thing because you'd already approved it.
well, I think if I could just add too,
Good point.
now that and I hope this is temporary, but now that I am sitting on a cushion because of my tailbone, it would actually be easier for me to sit on the flat stone bench than to sit on the curved wooden bench, ironically, because it is, you would think a curved bench would be best for sitting, and usually it is.
Yeah. Could I make a
So-
suggestion? Just because I think Ruth's point is valid, but I do think that this is very aesthetic.
Oh, it is. It's beautiful.
It completes the look of the upper area. It really, the whole thing, and that isn't where you would put
A picnic.
a picnic table anyway. So I think maybe what might be helpful is looking down the road, if we could keep in mind that it might be helpful to think of
Yeah.
some kind of eating,
Yeah.
separate from this. Because like Sam did say, and I think sometimes at town meeting, this happens to us as well. You go to town meeting to discuss one thing, and then all of a sudden, people are like, think that they're approving which direction our, the height of our chairs. You know what I mean? Literally, it gets down to that level.
Yeah.
But, that's kind of the nature of town meeting, right?
And I
But-
think
But I do think it makes sense to kind of, as you see how people use the park down the road, that it may be that some type of picnic benches or
Yeah.
Okay.
or tables might be helpful there.
And it is a beautiful bench.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion?
No.
Thank you all. Do we need a vote? There's no vote, just
No vote.
discussion.
there
No vote needed,
Just a
but
discussion.
since there's no formal objection from the board, there's no issue with proceeding
Absolutely
forward.
not.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's continue on. We have the consent agenda. Selectman Campbell,
I move the board approve all non-held items on the consent agenda.
is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, 0. The motion passes 5-0.
Awesome.
Selectmen and town administrator updates and liaison reports. Who wants to go first? Denise, please.
Sure, I'll go. I was lucky enough to attend the event in Gloucester. Was it just a week ago Wednesday, Tom? Yeah, a week ago Wednesday. It was the Climate Crisis Action Meeting. It was packed. There were over 100 people there from all different organizations, churches, political organizations, Lots of Rockport representation. Tom was there from the Finance Committee. Quite a few members of the DPW board was there. Joe Parisi was there. So Rockport was well represented, and it was a really productive working session that will see its next iteration on October 25th, I think it is, at the UU Church in Gloucester to try to develop a Cape Ann-wide action plan. Because as we know, the weather doesn't respect town boundaries, so we need to work together to come up with something to kind of protect Cape Ann. And then the following evening, Catherine Glenn from Coastal Zone Management spoke at the community house, and even though it was a rainy night and I didn't expect a whole lot of people there, we had really good attendance at that. It was an excellent educational session. And one of the things I wanted to suggest to Jason, and I will mention this to him, is that he should have the homeowner on Marmion Way reach out to Catherine. She's very open and available to consult with homeowners about, you know, the best way to protect their property and sort of the considerations if you're going to put up a stone wall, the things you should know before you put that stone wall up. And Mitch and Ruth were also there. It was really an excellent, and I think you were there too, right, Tom? Yeah, it was an excellent session. So I'm actually going to look to sponsor a series of talks. Also last week was Climate Action Week because of the UN climate meeting. And I did an interview with 1623 Studios along with a number of other people who are involved in this matter for Cape Ann. And I met a couple of people, one of them the director of the UMass Center over in Bayview, and another environmental lawyer who went to Antarctica and did scuba diving there and has a really good talk on, he said the water was colder here. For what it's worth. A really good talk that he is doing for schools and so forth. So we're going to have him come and talk as well.
Good. Anyone else?
Yep.
Yes.
I went to Catherine Glenn's thing, and she was excellent speaker. Gave a lot of really interesting facts about the pocket beaches and all the different beaches of Rockport and what to expect with climate change and sea rise. Very basic, very good, very easy to understand. It was an excellent evening meeting. I went to the chamber meeting on the Wednesday, and that was good. We gave a little update on what was happening around town, that the sheriff's department had come over and helped the DPW and the fire department. Harvest Fest coming up, the DPW facility vote. Monica was there to talk about the Building Study Committee and giving her pitch. We talked about what wonderful turnout there was at the town meeting, the new consent agenda that we have now that we're working with, and getting more items on the table to discuss and not having to have all those small things. And also, I did a thank you and a shout out to the fire department, thanking them for such a wonderful job, especially to those people down on Main Street with that fire that we had that could have been a catastrophe if it happened during the night. Then there was lots of talk about the new bylaw, about the plastics and the water bottles. Lots of discussion about that. But I did take away from it that some of the things were, a couple things were good in that they talked about maybe working. These are things that are going to work, they're going to impact Rockport, Gloucester, Essex, and Manchester. So why don't we work together with the Cape Ann Caucus and do a couple of roundtables, and we all get on the same page, and we all work together, and we all talk about composting containers or bins or ways to recycle things in our town to go along with the ban and help different people. So that was a real positive thing that came out, and that the chamber were the people who offered that up and said that would be a good series type thing to bring forward. So I think, you know, it was there were a lot of people talking about the new bylaw that town meeting passed, but I think it has some potential for working out very well. I think it was when I left, I felt pretty good about it after their talk.
Good. Thank you, Ruth.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I was interviewed yesterday by third graders up at the school who asked questions about our job as select people. They were shocked that we don't get paid, which was ironic. Other questions included, how do I get here for meetings? Do I have a dog? And then some really, I joke, but some really like insightful questions like how can young people help make a difference in the community? Some really cool questions. And they had each written a question, but then they kind of jumbled them up and spread them out so kids didn't necessarily ask their own questions. So some kids were really upset that they weren't. So some kids like approached me after to ask their personal question as well. And I know I have a third grader who chose to go to a different session, not mine, because he said he knows me well. And the whole third grade is coming to town hall tomorrow. They were supposed to come at the end of the week, but because of the weather, we did this. I think this is the second year in a row, and they're gonna
so much
visit
fun
the
last year.
offices upstairs, and then they're gonna come down here. And as we learned last year, their favorite thing is getting to hit the gavel and sit. And I told them they could pretend that they were live on television. So they're just like super excited for that. So thanks to Mitch, and I think Ruth is gonna be here. I'm gonna try to slip out of work. But it's pretty cool. Third grade, even when I was in third grade in Rockport, I remember studying the town and coloring the town seal. So it's pretty cool
Yeah.
that curriculum is still there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
So-
important. Maybe the future selectmen.
I told them
planning
that.
board
I
member,
told them
School
that.
committee
Yeah.
member.
Yep, and lots of them told me that they vote with their parents, which was cool.
Yeah.
So good luck to you tomorrow, Mitch.
Looking forward to
I remember
it.
doing that.
They're
That was a lot
super
of fun.
fun. Yeah.
It is
That was a
fun.
lot of
So
Good.
I think that's all I had this week.
That's it. All right, I'm gonna go right into the fun stuff. Selectman Campbell signed payroll warrant number 13, totaling $553,194.02, and expense warrant number 13, totaling $589,333.95 on September 25th, 2019. Selectman Campbell signed the payroll warrant number 14, totaling $111,837.48. Expense warrant number 14, totaling $248,462.62. Pardon me, on October 1st, 2019. Selectman Campbell signed payroll warrant number 15, totaling $625,428.69. And expense warrant number 15, totaling $275,635.08 on October 8th, 2019.
Great.
Excellent. Okay, let's go down to the discussion items of our agenda. We have easement process and the short-term rental impact fee.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, just to put out there, no decisions are going to be made on either of these topics this evening. So this is
Hence discussion.
Yes, I wanted to just clarify that in case anybody is here for these in
Sure.
particular. Just looking to get some information from the board. So on the de minimis easement process, this is the first one, certainly that's proceeding along under the process that was approved by town meeting in September 2017. So it needed to first go to Finance Committee and the Planning Board to provide specific recommendations. The Finance Committee needed to determine that there was no negative financial impact to the town. And two, Planning Board needed to determine there were no foreseeable long-range planning impacts as a result of potentially granting it. And then, of course, the final decision on an easement under this process is with the Board of Selectmen, who would officially grant something like that. So the Planning Board submitted their letter. Finance Committee is on its way. The chair has been ill, so she's going to be sending that shortly. So I'm looking to see how the board would like to proceed with this particular topic. Do you want to simply review the letters and consider it? Do you want representation from the Planning Board and the Finance Committee to come in and have a discussion with you on this particular issue? So I'm looking just to gauge, because first time here, so this is uncharted for all of us.
Well, my initial opinion would be to have the Finance Committee and the Planning Board visit with us.
Okay.
So we're talking about changing the process.
No, the process we've never gone through this step before, so
Right, this would be.
it was new. This is entirely new. We've never done a de minimis easement this way.
Oh,
So
got it.
instead of
Okay.
me just giving you the letters and saying make your decision, I
Oh,
want
should
to.
they come
Do
in
you
or
want to
not?
do
Oh,
that,
I
or
can
do you want
explain it.
Sorry, I was
FinCom and
confused.
planning? That's good.
Okay.
FinCom and planning to come in and
Okay.
Yeah.
discuss these with you and walk through their recommendations.
Well, for a building permit, you have to sign off on different departments, correct? You have to sign, don't you have to, your taxes are paid, different thing, don't you have to?
You do. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so wouldn't it behoove us to get everybody involved, who's appropriate for this, to get them to sign off, so it's not just us as sole arbiters of this?
So, well, no, they've done their
They've
piece
done
already.
that.
So they're done, so
Right.
that's.
Yes, so my point
I
is,
guess
do you
that's-
want them to come and talk about what
Yes.
they've done with you directly, or do you want to
Yes.
just read their
I-
letters?
I don't,
Can't hurt.
I don't
Yeah,
know if they need to,
Chairman?
I don't know if they need to come in.
I went to
No,
the,
then
okay.
to Dawn. Go ahead. No,
No.
you go.
No, I didn't, I'm done, I'm good.
I think it's important for them to come in. I think it was a big, I didn't know the process, and I think it would be good if we have the new bylaw to look at and
Mhm.
understand.
Yep.
And get their letters, so we have some questions, and that they can tell us why they feel the way they feel.
Mhm.
I think it's very, I went to the planning board meeting and heard all of this, and my comments were that an easement, I mean, just, I think they need to come in. I think we all need to talk together.
Yes, yes. There are issues on this instant case that definitely require some attention.
Yes.
As the chair of the planning
Yes.
board
Okay.
indicated.
Yes.
They're leaning, they've leaned towards recommending a license. I don't want to get too specific on this
Right.
particular case
Okay.
now, but
Right.
procedurally, it appears that the board would like them to come in to have an opportunity to discuss,
Right.
generally speaking. And this will be the process that we'll use moving forward.
Where you'll ask us if we want everyone to come in?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
yeah. Well, no, we now will have them come in.
Okay.
You're
So that-
talking about having
I
them
don't
come in
think
for
it can
every
hurt. Yeah, I
de
think
minimis
it's-
easement
right.
that comes in?
Right. It
But
isn't.
if it's a, here's the thing, if it's a de minimis easement, it's de minimis by nature, which means it's really not that big of a deal, and it's the way it's presented, I guess. So if there was, even if they provided us a one-page synopsis of how they arrived at it, I think to ask them to come in here, it might be a bit of an inconvenience for them. I mean, it's not a big deal. If they come in, fine, it's not that much of a problem. But as long as we know what the reasoning and rationale is they use to reach that decision, I think that's really what we need. As long as they can supply that to us, and they can do that by an email or a
Yeah,
form.
so here's my question. In this case, could they come in and then in the future, if we don't think they need to come in?
You certainly could.
Right.
Right,
certainly
just
could
because
just
like
say
it
no.
seems like
As
there
need
might,
basis.
there might be a
Yeah.
case that it's
Yeah.
simple, everyone's on the same
That's my
page,
point.
there's no,
That's fine.
but we could, but for this one, clearly, I think
This
A,
one,
because it's our
everybody is
first one,
not-
B, we're not
yeah.
all on the same page.
Yep.
So I think that makes
Yeah.
sense. I just,
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't think we need the ability to say, you know what, there's
Yes
no
or
need
no.
to.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Okay.
Right.
That's fine. So we will,
That sounds great.
we'll book them to come in for a future meeting
Yeah.
to go through this piece,
Yeah.
and we'll invite certainly the homeowner to
But we need to make
he's
sure that
present for it.
everybody's singing off the same sheet of music, so we all know. So they know that we definitely want, at a minimum, their reasoning.
Oh, they have to.
So
Yeah.
it-
Right, and
it's
that's
in
fine.
the,
bylaw,
it's in
they
the
have
vote.
to.
So they've
Right,
complied with.
but it's not, they don't have to come in here. That's just something we would suggest and ask
We're
them to
asking.
do.
So the selectmen have the prerogative certainly to ask any board
That's,
to come in.
that's what I'm saying.
Perfect.
So it depends, each case is individual, I
Right,
guess.
but I think
So-
this one, where it's the first case.
Yep, it really
and
should.
there are some questions,
Then we'll
and,
bring 'em in.
and my big question is, why do people need an easement when they have enough property for something? That's where I am.
Well, I
that'll be
think we
something-
don't know the
So
facts.
is it-
Right,
Yeah,
so-
really,
and that-
so
and
I
that will
don't
be
think we
something
should
that the
be
homeowner
discussing
will-
it.
No,
Yeah.
will
But that's
be
why
asked
we
to-
need people in to talk
walk
about it
through.
and discuss it.
Yep, okay, so we'll be sure to have somebody, we'll have everybody present
Yep.
at a future meeting.
Good.
So the second item is just a very preliminary discussion. I'm looking just to gauge the board very generally on the short-term rental impact fee. So,
my
the,
80th
as of
night.
July 1, the state started taxing short-term rentals.
Yep.
And they've applied the hotel motel tax to each of those rentals. And the municipalities have an opportunity, if they wish, to also assess a short-term local option community impact fee of up to 3% on each of those. So there are two, should the town opt to do that, there are two separate fees. The first local option fee is for professionally managed units, that which is defined as one of two or more short-term rental units within a single, two, or three family dwelling that includes the operator's primary residence. And there is another. The second one is professionally managed units, which is basically you're buying it to rent it out on purpose, separate. You don't live there; it's not tied into your home. So there's the ones that are part of your home where you're renting out, maybe the basement or the upper floors, and then there's certainly there's an impact fee if it's just a rental unit that you purchased. So there's that, and the impact fee is somewhat unique. So when the state enacted it, they require that at a minimum, 35% of the impact fee must be dedicated to either affordable housing or local infrastructure projects. So this is the first time where they've really put restrictions on funding, and I think that it's certainly worth a discussion and considering what that looks like for us. Dedicated funding for affordable housing and/or infrastructure projects. And infrastructure is very broadly defined as anything for which a community could borrow for, which is a massive option. I think that that's something that is worthy of a bigger discussion. So what I'm looking to do this evening is just get the general sense, are you interested in pursuing this and reviewing it further, or are you not interested in adding any additional fees on this process? I'm just looking to gauge the board generally on where you are.
I'll go first, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'm opposed to it.
Okay.
I don't think we should be placing more fees on people because they own a property. And I say that reluctantly because I live in a neighborhood where I'm surrounded by these properties. I own one, but not in town. I own it in another state, as Ruth knows. And I just don't think that we should be placing additional, because somebody owns a property and they choose to use it for, I don't want to say commercial purposes because it's not commercial, but as a money-making venture in some way, or to offset costs, whether it be elderly or whoever, I don't think we should be penalizing them for doing so. So I'm opposed to adding another tax onto something like this. I understand in a time like we are now, where we could use every bit of income that we have, I get that. But I don't think we should be adding more taxes on top of this, so I'm opposed to it.
Anyone else?
I think we should look into it. I think all my years in town, when I think of all the inns and guest houses that have been here, and how many of them have had to close because of all kinds of other accommodations that are out there for people to take advantage of, how many places just in the last probably 3 years have sold as private residences or turned into condos of those beautiful inns in town. I think we need to do it to help protect the character of Rockport in the inns that we have and help and see what we can do to help.
Okay. Denise?
Yeah, I think we should look into it as well. I don't want us to become, and I think there's a risk of us becoming a town that's not inhabited by people year-round and is just a bunch of commercial properties. And so I think, you know, in the interest of preserving the character of the town and addressing the needs of the inn owners who have been very upset about, understandably, about, you know, what the Airbnb usage has done to the town, and to just, you know, kind of make sure we're looking at all of our options, I think we should look into it.
Okay. Sarah, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. I'm happy to look into it, although my gut instinct is I actually leaned against it for an interesting reason. Is I know people who live here and have, you know, kids in the school system here and rent out parts of their house so they're able to live here all year. So I wouldn't want to, I fear something like this that double dips. You know, you pay your property taxes and then now you have to pay the state taxes and then you have to pay. So I just fear that we turn into like how much, you know, I see both sides. So I'm happy, I'm happy to look into it. That's kind of my gut. I was reading about Gloucester, which has just implemented it.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting twist that they've put where the money will go, which is, you know, obviously an incentive, right, towards local officials. Because, you know, that means that less of it gets sucked into the general fund, which is where, the 65% would
The
go?
65% go,
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I can see both sides. I'm happy to look into it, but, but cautiously, obviously, so.
So we'll look into it.
Okay, so we'll proceed forward. The finance officers will start to dig into it a bit more. We actually have to, it's a bit odd, we actually have to write to the DOR to request who's registered with them. There's no database for us to actually go and look. So we'll get that letter out to them and we'll start the process of evaluating what this would look like. And we'll give you some different scenarios once we have some information.
So
Certainly
that's-
to address, there could be, to your point, Sarah, that there could be one adopted and not the other. You know, one addresses where owners are living in it, and one
Okay.
addresses where they're not.
Right.
Okay.
So that's there
Yeah,
are
which
two
is
specific
interesting.
fees. So
Yeah.
that's something that certainly,
Interesting. Yeah.
however the board may decide,
Yeah.
but
They're
there's,
savvy.
there are
I mean,
options
they're
that
getting
apply
savvy.
to it.
You know, they're figuring it out.
Oh, yeah.
It's
They
interesting.
know what
So
to do.
it must be that because now the state is assessing this new tax, now they have a way to track now they have a way to
They-
track people down.
They do, and they're requiring
Right.
it, and
Which they couldn't do
VRBO
before.
and Airbnb
Right.
know that.
Yeah.
So we've had a huge influx of people calling our office, the assessor's office, the clerk's office, saying, "What the heck? Why did you tax me more?" And we're saying it's not. It's the state that's now
Yeah.
applying.
Yeah, I had
hotel
people reach
tax
out to
to it.
me, and I researched it because they had their tax preparer was like, I have no idea what's.
Yes, the state really didn't do a great job telling people that
Shocking.
July 1st was going to be the date. It just started appearing
Yeah,
in some cases.
yeah.
So
July 1st is also an strange time to start something like that.
That's
all I
the
can, it's fiscal
fiscal
year.
Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah.
so we'll start to take a look at it. Certainly, we're not in any kind of position to look at what impact it may have on the budget moving forward, but enough to at least give you some options once we can get an idea of who's registered and how many have actually gone through that process with the state.
It'd be good to know that.
Yeah.
It would.
Good to
it
know
would.
that anyway.
what the
actually.
impact
It's
is.
it's a little
regardless.
odd, I have to say, that
Yeah.
they don't have that available in the gateway system that we utilize. They have everything is searchable there. For some reason, this isn't. So we will go through the process
Wow.
and track that down.
Interesting.
In my neighborhood, they're on my street, and just around the corner, there are 4 units. And I'm on King Street Court, so I'm only 3 houses on the street.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by 4 that do that. And it's a burden on me because, and anybody for that matter, because you have people who are coming in and out at all hours of the
Yeah.
night, and I've experienced this. But that's irrelevant to the point. The point is about the tax. Should we do it?
Yeah.
I'm opposed to it, but I'm
Yeah.
interested in hearing other points of
Yeah.
view.
So
And I guess we'll
question,
go down there.
do the owners live there as well, or are they rented, or is the property totally rented out?
On one property, which is a house I used to own actually, they are part-time.
The owners are part-time, they
Part-time.
rent it out
Actually,
part-time.
2 of, I own both of the I used to own both of the houses. Both of them are part-time. One is, they have a winter rental, they do a long-term.
Yeah.
And then the other one, they do seasonal, they do
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be
weeks.
interesting to see the statistics
Yeah.
of all
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
regardless. Yeah, cool.
Yep, so we'll go through that process.
Okay.
Thank you for the guidance on those 2 items. And Mr. Chair, I just have one other item, just to make the
Please,
board aware.
go
And so after the meeting, yourself and the Vice Chair and I sat down to talk about booking some bigger topics. And the plan would be that the board would add a workshop on Tuesday, the 29th, to address the sewer capacity discussion.
Of
with the Planning board.
October?
Yep. Tuesday, the 29th of October, to meet with the planning board and the commissioners to go over the updated Kleinfelder report and discuss the topic generally. So just to put that out there,
Is it?
it would be an extra meeting.
Are we putting that on there, or? Are we-
So barring the majority saying they can't make it, the plan would be that we'd apply that.
So I have a question before we book that. We received the information.
Yep.
Do we have someone, I'm guessing it might have to be someone outside of our DPW who knows how to read those reports and knows like what they mean? Because I feel like in the past we've looked at them and we're like, so what does this mean, like according to our plant?
So I think from what I read in the updated Kleinfelder one, it was broken down in pretty straightforward language. It
Pretty
wasn't
clear.
a technical report. My
Yeah.
sense, it was more
Yeah.
of, if you do this, this is what you'll have left. So
Right.
it was broken down very well.
Okay,
It's
so you're
pretty
comfortable.
clear.
Yeah.
That's pretty clear.
Okay,
It's very
Yeah.
much a, if you do this, you'll have this.
Right.
And then it was very.
okay. So you're.
It was better than
comfortable.
the original.
Yeah,
one.
no, I,
Te-
yeah, I.
It
I-
wasn't overly technical from
Okay.
my reading of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else? Also, did we schedule the fueling discussion?
No.
We did not in our discussion point.
Okay, we
We're-
need
we're,
to-
we're booked through October and November right
Okay,
now,
the-
so.
The
So
first
that'd have to be
available,
December.
that
Yep.
needs to
Yep.
come up, because I've had discussions with people,
Yep.
pro and con.
Yep, and we left it that we were covered through October and November, and then
Yep.
we'd look to get it
Okay.
right after that.
Okay.
So are we yes for the 29th? Is that correct with everybody?
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Workshop.
Everybody's good? Okay.
Yep.
Yep, so yes, it is a yes. So we'll
Will that be
redistribute.
6:30, Mitch?
Yes, unless there's an issue, it'd be normal
No,
meeting
that's-
time,
I'm
6:30.
fine. I just wanted to make sure, so I added it.
And we'll redistribute the materials that we have on the topic, so everybody's on the same page. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that's all I had.
Very good. Does anyone have any unanticipated business or announcements?
Nope.
Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, 0. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.